When wealth can't buy sight, can love restore what medicine cannot? Marcus Wellington had everything except hope for his blind newborn son. His wife blamed him. Doctors gave up. Then Emma Carter arrived, a mysterious 23-year-old nanny with secrets in her eyes and scars on her soul. What she discovered about baby Oliver in those first whispered lullabies would shatter everything they believed about blindness, fate, and the impossible. But the truth hiding in Emma's past might cost more than anyone was willing to pay. Will you stay until the final revelation? Like if you believe in miracles, and comment what you'd do in Marcus's place. The November rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Wellington estate as Marcus stood in the nursery, watching his 7-month-old son sleep. Oliver's tiny chest rose and fell peacefully, his unseeing eyes closed against a world he would never witness. Marcus pressed his palm against the cold glass, his reflection ghostly in the storm's darkness. 32 years old, worth $3 billion, and he couldn't fix the one thing that mattered. "Mr. Wellington?" The voice was soft, almost tentative. He turned to find the new nanny standing in the doorway. Emma Carter, 23 years old, with auburn hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and green eyes that seemed to hold decades more experience than her years suggested. She'd been hired just 2 weeks ago after the previous nanny quit, the 5th in 7 months. "He's sleeping," Marcus said curtly, turning back to the window. "You don't need to hover." "I wasn't hovering, sir. I heard you come in and thought—" She trailed off, then stepped into the room with a quiet confidence that surprised him. "May I ask you something?" "What?" His tone was sharper than intended, but exhaustion had frayed his patience to threads. Emma moved closer to the crib, her eyes fixed on Oliver with an intensity that made Marcus uncomfortable. "Has he had a full sensory development assessment? Beyond the ophthalmology?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "Every specialist in the country has examined him. The diagnosis is clear: complete bilateral optic nerve hypoplasia. His optic nerves never developed properly. There's nothing to fix, Miss Carter. No surgery, no treatment, no miracle cure." "I understand that, Mr. Wellington, but I'm not asking about his eyes." Emma reached into the crib and gently touched Oliver's tiny hand. The baby stirred, his fingers curling reflexively around hers. "I'm asking about everything else." "What's your point?" Marcus crossed his arms, fighting the urge to dismiss her like he'd dismissed every other well-meaning person who thought they understood his son's condition better than he did. Emma's eyes met his, and for a moment the air in the room seemed to shift. Children who can't see develop other senses more acutely, but it requires specific stimulation, specific techniques. I noticed Oliver's startle reflex is unusually pronounced, and his head-turning response to sounds is already more advanced than typical for his age. "So," Marcus's voice was cold defensive walls rising higher with each word. "So I think he's trying to tell us something." Emma's hand remained in the crib, Oliver's fingers still wrapped around her thumb. "I think he's already compensating, already building a different way of experiencing the world. And I think if we pay attention, really pay attention, we might discover he's not as limited as everyone believes." Before Marcus could respond, the nursery door swung open. Victoria Wellington swept in, her designer heels clicking on the hardwood floor, diamond earrings catching the dim lamplight. At 29, she was stunning in the way only money and meticulous maintenance could achieve. Her dark hair fell in perfect waves, her makeup flawless despite the late hour. "Marcus, what are you doing up here?" Her eyes flicked to Emma with barely concealed disdain. "And why is the help bothering you?" "Mrs. Wellington," Emma said evenly, releasing Oliver's hand and stepping back from the crib. I didn't ask you to speak." Victoria's voice could have frozen fire. She turned to Marcus, her expression softening in a way that never quite reached her eyes. "Darling, you need rest. Dr. Simmons said your blood pressure is concerning. Come back to bed." Marcus looked at his wife, then at Emma, then down at his sleeping son. The weight of the past 7 months pressed down on him like a physical force. The devastating diagnosis, delivered 3 days after Oliver's birth. The endless parade of specialists, each confirming what the last had said. The growing distance between him and Victoria, who still hadn't forgiven him for the genetic mutation the doctors suspected came from his side of the family. "Fine," he said finally, exhaustion winning over the strange curiosity Emma's words had sparked. "Miss Carter, you're dismissed for the night." Emma nodded and moved toward the door, but paused at the threshold. "Mr. Wellington, there's a documentary I'd like you to watch, about a school in Boston that works with blind children. They've developed some extraordinary techniques for early intervention." "We've tried everything," Victoria snapped before Marcus could respond. "Do you think we haven't explored every option? We've consulted with institutions across 3 continents. Our son is blind, Miss Carter. Permanently, irreversibly blind. No amount of wishful thinking from an inexperienced babysitter is going to change that." Emma's expression remained calm, but something flickered in her eyes. Not anger, but something deeper. Something that looked almost like recognition. "Of course, Mrs. Wellington. I apologize for overstepping. Good night." She slipped out of the room, leaving Marcus alone with his wife and his sleeping son. Victoria immediately began talking about a charity gala she was organizing, her words flowing over him like water over stone. But Marcus found himself staring at the doorway where Emma had stood, her words echoing in his mind. He's trying to tell us something. The next morning, Marcus woke to find Victoria's side of the bed empty. Not unusual anymore. She'd taken to sleeping in the guest house, claiming his restless nights disturbed her. He went through his morning routine on autopilot: shower, shave, dress in one of his perfectly tailored suits. The Wellington Technology Corporation wouldn't run itself, despite the fact that his heart hadn't been in it since Oliver's diagnosis. He was halfway down the grand staircase when he heard it. Music. Not the classical pieces Victoria preferred, but something else. Something with texture and layers, instruments weaving together in complex patterns. He followed the sound to the nursery wing. Emma sat in the rocking chair with Oliver in her arms, a small speaker on the side table playing what sounded like a jazz composition. But she wasn't just holding the baby, she was moving her hands in deliberate patterns around his head, never quite touching him, while humming along with the music. "What are you doing?" Marcus asked from the doorway. Emma didn't startle. "Good morning, Mr. Wellington. I'm introducing Oliver to spatial awareness through sound mapping. The music has distinct instruments coming from different directions, and I'm creating gentle air currents with my hands so he can begin to associate sound direction with physical presence." Marcus stepped into the room, fascinated despite himself. Oliver's head was indeed moving, tracking something. Whether the music or Emma's movements, he couldn't tell. "Where did you learn this?" he asked. Emma's hands continued their dance around Oliver's head. "I've studied early childhood development, specifically sensory integration for children with visual impairments. Before I came here, I worked with a research program in Portland that was exploring multisensory learning techniques. And you didn't think to mention this in your interview? The employment agency said you were looking for a nanny, not a specialist. I needed the job." She finally looked up at him, and Marcus saw something in her eyes that made him pause. A deep, personal understanding of loss. "But I can't watch a child's potential be limited by assumptions, Mr. Wellington. Not when I know what's possible." Marcus pulled up the ottoman and sat down, his eyes fixed on his son. "Show me. Show me what you see that I don't." For the next 30 minutes, Emma demonstrated techniques Marcus had never encountered in all his consultations with specialists. She showed him how Oliver's ears would move microscopically, tracking sounds with precision. How his breathing changed in response to different musical tones. How his fingers would flex and extend when certain textures were brought near his hands, even though he couldn't see them. "He's building a map," Emma explained, her voice soft but intense. "Not of what things look like, but of what they feel like, sound like, even smell like. His brain is creating an entirely different kind of vision. And he's remarkably gifted at it, Mr. Wellington. Remarkably." Marcus felt something crack open in his chest, something that had been frozen since that terrible day in Dr. Richardson's office when the diagnosis was confirmed. "You really believe he can have a full life?" Emma's smile was gentle but fierce. "I believe Oliver can have an extraordinary life, different from yours or mine, but no less rich, no less meaningful. Maybe even more so, because he'll experience the world in ways we can barely imagine." "Victoria won't like this," Marcus said, though even as he spoke, he knew it didn't matter. For the first time in months, he felt something other than despair. "With respect, sir, this isn't about Mrs. Wellington. It's about Oliver." Emma stood, cradling the baby against her shoulder. "And if you'll allow me, I'd like to show you both what he's capable of." Marcus looked at his son, really looked at him, and saw not a tragedy but a person, a small, perfect person who was already fighting to understand his world in his own unique way. "All right, Miss Carter, I'm listening." What Marcus didn't know was that Emma had lied about one crucial thing. The research program in Portland existed, but she hadn't worked there as a specialist. She'd been there as a patient years ago, when she was the blind child everyone had given up on. The experimental treatment that had partially restored her vision, a treatment that had never been replicated, never been fully understood, had left her with scars both physical and psychological. And the real reason she'd taken this job, the secret she couldn't reveal, was that Oliver's medical file contained the same genetic markers that had been found in her own blood. The markers that suggested Oliver's blindness might not be permanent at all. But proving it would mean exposing the truth about herself, about the illegal experiments that had saved her sight, about the people who had died in the trials before her. It would mean risking everything she'd built, every carefully constructed lie that had allowed her to have a normal life. As she placed Oliver back in his crib and watched Marcus leave for work with new hope in his eyes, Emma made a decision. She would help this child, whatever the cost, because she knew something that no doctor, no specialist, no billion-dollar diagnostic machine could tell them. She knew what it felt like to live in darkness and find the light. And she knew that sometimes miracles required sacrifice. 3 weeks passed and the Wellington estate transformed in subtle ways. Marcus found himself spending more time in the nursery, watching Emma work with Oliver through techniques that seemed more art than science. She'd created what she called a sensory garden in one corner of the large room. Different textures hung at various heights, wind chimes positioned to create overlapping sound patterns, even small containers of herbs that released different scents when touched. Victoria noticed the changes with growing displeasure. "This is absurd," she announced one afternoon, standing in the nursery doorway with her arms crossed. Emma was on the floor with Oliver, guiding his hands over a board covered in different fabrics, silk, burlap, velvet, sandpaper. "You're treating our son like an experiment." "I'm treating him like a child with unlimited potential," Emma replied calmly, not looking up. "Watch this, Mrs. Wellington." She moved Oliver's hand to the silk panel, then rang a small bell. Then she moved his hand to the burlap and clicked a clicker. Silk bell, burlap click. She repeated the pattern 5 times, then paused. Oliver's tiny hand reached out on its own, touching the silk, and he made a sound. Not quite a word, but an attempt at vocalization that sounded remarkably like bell. Marcus, who had been working on his laptop in the corner, looked up sharply. "Did he just—" "He's associating," Emma said, her voice trembling slightly with excitement. "He's not just experiencing these textures passively, he's categorizing them, remembering them, and now he's trying to communicate about them." Victoria's expression remained cold. "He's 8 months old. Babies that age babble. It doesn't mean anything." "It means everything," Marcus said, standing and crossing to where Emma sat with Oliver. He crouched down, his expensive suit creasing as his knees hit the floor. "Do it again, show me again." Emma repeated the exercise. This time Oliver's vocalization was even clearer, and when she moved his hand to the burlap, he made a clicking sound with his tongue, imitating the clicker. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. My God, he's learning. "Of course he's learning," Victoria snapped. "All babies learn, but you're both setting yourselves up for disappointment. Emma is filling your head with false hope, Marcus. Our son is blind. These little games aren't going to change that." Emma finally looked up at Victoria, and her expression was complicated, sympathy mixed with frustration and something harder to define. "Mrs. Wellington, I understand this is difficult, but Oliver's blindness doesn't define his intelligence, his capabilities, or his future. The sooner we all accept that and start building on his strengths instead of mourning his limitations, the better his life will be. Don't you dare presume to lecture me about my son," Victoria said, her voice dangerously quiet. "You've been here less than a month. You're a 23-year-old with no children of your own, no medical degree, nothing but theories and wishful thinking. That's enough, Victoria." Marcus's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He stood, still holding Oliver, who had begun to fuss at the harsh tones. "Emma has shown more insight into our son's development in 3 weeks than every specialist we've consulted in 7 months. I want her to continue." Victoria's face flushed with anger. "Fine. Continue your little projects, but when reality crashes down on both of you, don't expect me to pick up the pieces." She spun on her heel and left, her footsteps sharp and accusatory down the hallway. Marcus rocked Oliver gently, soothing him. "I'm sorry," he said to Emma. "She's struggling with this in her own way." "I understand," Emma replied, though her expression suggested she understood more than Marcus realized. She began putting away the sensory boards, her movements careful and precise. "Mr. Wellington, can I ask you something personal? Go ahead. Why did you really hire me? My resume wasn't particularly impressive compared to the other candidates the agency surely sent you. I'm young, relatively inexperienced with infants, and I have gaps in my employment history that I know you must have noticed." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, swaying slightly with Oliver in his arms. The baby had calmed, his small hand gripping Marcus's tie. "You want the truth?" "Always. When you came for the interview, you looked at Oliver differently than anyone else had. The other candidates either showed pity or tried too hard to pretend they didn't notice his blindness. But you looked at him like he was just a baby, not a tragic case, not a challenge to overcome, just a person." Marcus smiled sadly. "I think I was hoping you'd teach me to see him that way too." Emma's eyes glistened. "He is just a baby, Mr. Wellington. A wonderful, perfect, extraordinary baby who happens to experience the world differently than we do. That's not a tragedy. That's just Oliver. Call me Marcus, please. Mr. Wellington makes me feel like my father." "Marcus, then?" Emma smiled, a real smile that transformed her usually serious face. "In that case, I have a proposal for you. There's a conference in Boston next month, the International Symposium on Visual Impairment and Early Development. Some of the world's leading researchers will be presenting new findings. I think we should attend." Marcus hesitated. "I don't know if I can take time away from the company right now. We're in the middle of a major acquisition." "Then bring your work. Bring your entire team if you need to. But Marcus, they're going to be presenting research that could change everything. We think we know about neuroplasticity in blind infants. There's a doctor, Dr. Sarah Chen from MIT, who's developed a protocol that's shown remarkable results in children under 1 year old." "What kind of results?" Emma's expression became carefully neutral. "Significant improvements in spatial cognition, motor development, and in some cases unexpected visual responses to certain stimuli." Marcus's pulse quickened. "Visual responses, you mean?" "I mean it's worth investigating," Emma said quickly. "I'm not promising anything, Marcus, but I think we owe it to Oliver to explore every possibility." That night, after Emma had left for the small apartment she rented in town, Marcus found himself in his study, researching Dr. Sarah Chen. What he discovered both excited and troubled him. Chen's work was controversial, involving techniques that some in the medical community considered experimental at best, dangerous at worst. But her results were undeniable. Children in her program showed cognitive development far beyond typical benchmarks for blind infants. He was so absorbed in his research that he didn't hear Victoria enter until she spoke. "Are you really considering this?" She stood in the doorway, a glass of wine in her hand, her usual armor of makeup and jewelry stripped away to reveal the exhausted woman beneath. Considering what? Going to Boston, chasing after more false hope. Victoria moved into the room, sinking into the leather chair across from his desk. "Marcus, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep pretending that if we just find the right specialist, the right treatment, the right miracle, everything will be okay." "Victoria, let me finish." She took a long drink of wine. "When Oliver was born, I thought I could handle it. I thought love would be enough, but every time I look at him, all I see is everything he'll never have. He'll never see my face. He'll never see a sunset, or read a book, or drive a car. And I know I know I'm supposed to focus on what he can do instead of what he can't. But I'm not strong enough, Marcus. I'm just not. Marcus came around the desk and knelt beside her chair, taking her free hand. You are strong enough. We both are. And Emma is showing us that Oliver's life doesn't have to be defined by limitations. Victoria looked at him with red-rimmed eyes. Emma, you trust her so completely. Don't you think it's strange? This young woman who appeared out of nowhere, who seems to know exactly what to say, exactly how to give you hope. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm asking you to be careful, to think critically. We know almost nothing about her background, and suddenly she's the center of our son's life, the center of your attention. Victoria's voice cracked. I'm his mother, Marcus. I carried him for 9 months, but somehow in just 3 weeks, Emma has become more important to his development than I am. Marcus felt the truth in her words like a punch to the gut. That's not true. Isn't it? Victoria pulled her hand away and stood, moving to the window. You spend every spare moment in the nursery watching her work with him. You take her suggestions as gospel. When was the last time you asked me what I thought about his care? Marcus opened his mouth to respond, then closed it. She was right. He had been so caught up in Emma's techniques, in the hope she represented, that he'd pushed Victoria further away. I'm sorry, he said finally. You're right. I should have included you more. Victoria turned, and in the dim light from the desk lamp, Marcus saw the woman he'd fallen in love with 5 years ago, brilliant, fierce, vulnerable. I want to believe, Marcus. I want to believe that Emma can help him, that there's some way to make this better. But I'm terrified that if I let myself hope again, it'll destroy me when reality proves otherwise. Marcus crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. She resisted for a moment, then collapsed against him, her body shaking with silent sobs. They stood that way for a long time, two people drowning in different ways, trying to find solid ground. What neither of them knew was that Emma sat in her car in the circular driveway, unable to bring herself to drive away. She'd forgotten her phone in the nursery and had returned to find the house dark except for the study. She'd heard everything through the partially open window. Victoria's words echoed in her mind. Don't you think it's strange? This young woman who appeared out of nowhere. If Victoria only knew how right she was to be suspicious, if she knew about the falsified credentials Emma had used to get past the employment agency's background check, if she knew about the sealed medical records Emma had bribed a clerk to hide, if she knew that Emma's real name wasn't Emma Carter at all, but Emma Castellano, and that 10 years ago she'd been patient zero in an experimental treatment that had been shut down by the FDA after 3 children died. Emma gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white. She should leave. She should walk away before her presence damaged this family further. But every time she held Oliver, every time she saw him respond to the sensory exercises, every time she watched his tiny brain build new pathways around his blindness, she saw herself. She saw the scared, blind 6-year-old she'd been before the treatment, before the miracle that had given her partial sight at such a terrible cost. And she saw something else. Something she hadn't told Marcus, hadn't told anyone. In Oliver's latest blood work, which she'd secretly had analyzed by a former colleague from the Portland program, she'd found the same genetic markers that had made her responsive to the experimental treatment, the same rare mutation that occurred in less than 1 in 10 million people. Oliver wasn't just a blind baby who could compensate through enhanced sensory development. He was a candidate for the treatment that had saved her, the treatment that had killed 3 other children, the treatment that had been declared too dangerous, too unpredictable, too experimental to ever be attempted again. Emma started the car, her mind made up. She would go to Boston, she would contact Dr. Chen, and she would find out if the research had advanced enough, if the protocols had been refined enough, if there was any chance at all, that Oliver could be given the gift of sight without paying the price in blood that Emma's generation had paid. But first, she needed to tell Marcus the truth about who she really was, or at least part of it. The next morning, Emma arrived at the estate to find Marcus waiting for her in the nursery. Oliver was still asleep in his crib, the dawn light filtering through the curtains, painting soft shadows across his peaceful face. "We need to talk," Marcus said, and Emma's heart sank. Had he discovered something? Had Victoria hired a private investigator? Of course, she managed, setting down her bag. Marcus gestured to the rocking chairs, and they sat facing each other. He looked tired, as if he hadn't slept, but there was a determination in his eyes she hadn't seen before. I'm going to Boston, he said, to the conference, and I want you to come with me. I want you to introduce me to Dr. Chen and anyone else whose work might help Oliver. Emma's relief was so intense she almost laughed. I think that's an excellent idea, but I need something from you first. Marcus leaned forward, his gaze intense. I need you to be completely honest with me about your background, about your experience with visual impairment, about why you care so much about helping my son. Emma's mouth went dry. This was it. The moment of truth. Or at least the moment of partial truth. What do you want to know? Everything, starting with why you really came to work for us. Emma took a deep breath, her mind racing through the carefully constructed story she'd prepared for exactly this moment. But looking at Marcus's face, at the desperate hope and growing trust in his eyes, she found she couldn't lie to him, not completely. When I was 6 years old, she began, her voice steady despite the storm of emotion inside her. I was blind, not from birth. I lost my sight in an accident. And for 2 years I lived in the darkness that Oliver lives in now. Marcus's eyes widened. You were blind, but I can see now, partially. About 60% of normal vision, with significant blind spots and light sensitivity. I wear contacts that help, and I've learned to compensate for the gaps. Emma pulled off her glasses, which she'd always claimed were for reading, and looked directly at him. Look closely at my eyes, Marcus. Really look. He leaned closer, studying her face. And then he saw it, the faint scarring around her irises, the slight irregularity in how her pupils responded to light. My God, he whispered. How is this possible? An experimental treatment, gene therapy combined with stem cell transplantation, and a drug protocol that was supposed to regenerate optic nerve tissue. It was incredibly dangerous, highly illegal after the FDA shut down the program, and it only worked in me. Emma's voice cracked. 3 other children died in the trials. The doctors who performed it were charged with criminal negligence. The research was buried, the results sealed. Marcus sat back, processing this information. And you think Oliver might be a candidate for something similar? I think the research has advanced. I think there are doctors who continued the work privately, who refined the protocols, who might have found a way to make it safe. Dr. Chen is one of them. Emma reached out and took his hand. But Marcus, I need you to understand something. I'm not promising a cure. I'm not even promising this is the right path. All I'm saying is that I see in Oliver the same potential I had, the same genetic markers that made me responsive to treatment. And I think we owe it to him to investigate. Why didn't you tell me this from the beginning? Because I was afraid. Afraid you'd see me as a freak. Afraid you'd think I was exploiting Oliver to validate my own experience. Afraid that if I admitted who I really was, I'd lose the chance to help him. Tears ran down Emma's cheeks. I've spent 10 years trying to forget what I went through, trying to build a normal life. But then I saw Oliver's medical file in the agency's database, and I saw those genetic markers, and I knew I couldn't walk away. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his thumb absently stroking the back of her hand. Finally, he spoke. Victoria was right. There is something strange about you, something that seemed too good to be true. He smiled sadly. But she was wrong about your motivations. You're not here to hurt us or exploit us. You're here because you understand my son in a way no one else can. I want to help him, Marcus, more than anything. Then help him. Take me to Boston. Introduce me to Dr. Chen. And whatever happens, whatever we discover, we'll face it together. Emma nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She'd told him part of the truth, but she hadn't told him everything. She hadn't told him about the nightmares she still had about the treatment, about the screaming pain as her optic nerves regrew, about watching the other children in the program die one by one. She hadn't told him about the price of her miracle. And she definitely hadn't told him that Dr. Chen wasn't just a researcher she'd read about. Doctor, Chen was her doctor, the woman who had saved her life and destroyed 3 others, the woman who had made Emma promise never to reveal what had happened in that secret facility in Portland, the woman who would almost certainly refuse to help Oliver because she'd sworn never to attempt the treatment again. As Oliver began to wake, making soft sounds in his crib, Emma stood to go to him, but Marcus caught her arm. "One more thing," he said. "Emma Castellano. That's your real name, isn't it?" She froze. "How did you—" "I'm a billionaire, Emma. I have resources. After our conversation yesterday about Boston, I had my security team do a deep background check. They found the sealed records, the name change, all of it." Marcus's grip on her arm was gentle but firm. "I don't care about any of that. But I need to know that from this moment forward you'll be honest with me. Completely honest. Can you promise me that?" Emma met his eyes, saw the vulnerability and strength there in equal measure, and made a decision that would change everything. "I promise, no more secrets." It was a lie, of course, because the biggest secret of all, the one thing she absolutely couldn't tell him, was that she'd already contacted Dr. Chen and Dr. Chen had agreed to see them in Boston, not to discuss public research, but to evaluate Oliver privately for the treatment that might save his sight or end his life, the treatment that Emma had already decided, in her heart, was worth the risk, even if Marcus never forgave her for it. The Boston skyline glittered against the October evening sky as Marcus's private jet touched down at Logan International Airport. Emma sat across from him in the luxury cabin, Oliver sleeping peacefully in her arms. The baby had been remarkably calm during the flight, responding to the engine vibrations with what Emma recognized as curious attention rather than distress. Victoria had refused to come. The argument before their departure had been brutal. "You're chasing ghosts," she'd said, standing in the bedroom doorway as Marcus packed. "Taking our infant son across the country to meet with some controversial researcher because your nanny had a miraculous recovery 10 years ago. Do you hear how insane that sounds?" "What I hear," Marcus had replied, carefully folding a shirt, "is fear. And I understand it, Victoria. I'm terrified too, but I'm more terrified of doing nothing and wondering for the rest of my life if we missed our chance. Your chance, not our chance. Yours and Emma's." Victoria's voice had turned cold. "You've made your choice clear, Marcus. I hope it's worth it when this all falls apart." Now, as the car service drove them through Boston's historic streets toward the Fairmont Copley Plaza, Marcus found himself questioning that choice. What if Victoria was right? What if he was so desperate for hope that he'd convinced himself Emma's impossible story was somehow relevant to Oliver? "You're doubting," Emma said softly, reading his expression in the passing streetlights. "How can you tell?" "Because I'm doubting too." She adjusted Oliver in her arms. "Marcus, I need to tell you something before we meet Dr. Chen tomorrow." His stomach tightened. "What?" "The treatment I underwent, it wasn't just dangerous because of the medical risks. It was dangerous because of what it required from the patient." Emma's eyes were distant, seeing something Marcus couldn't. The gene therapy had to be administered directly into the optic nerve. "While I was conscious." "Because they needed me to report what I was seeing, feeling, experiencing in real time so they could adjust the dosage." Marcus felt sick. "Emma, you were 6 years old." "I know, and they gave me something for the pain, but not enough to dull my responses. I had to be alert." Her voice was matter-of-fact, but her hands trembled slightly. "It took 6 hours, Marcus. 6 hours of needles in my eyes while I described colors and shapes and sensations that I didn't have words for. And after each session, there were 4 sessions over 2 months, I had to spend 3 days in complete darkness while the cells regenerated. My God! The 3 children who died, they didn't die from the treatment itself. They died from infections afterward, from their bodies rejecting the stem cells, from complications that no one could have predicted." Emma looked down at Oliver. "And even if Oliver has the same genetic markers I did, even if Dr. Chen has refined the protocol, even if everything goes perfectly, he would have to endure something similar. A baby who can't understand why he's in pain, why people he trusts are hurting him, why the world has become nothing but suffering. Marcus reached across and took her hand. Then why are we here? Because the alternative is accepting that he'll never see, never watch a sunset or see your face or read a book. And maybe that would be okay. Maybe he could have a full, wonderful life without sight. But what if we have the chance to give him a choice and we don't take it because we're too afraid? Emma's tears finally spilled over. I can't answer that question for you, Marcus. Only you can decide what risks you're willing to take for your son. The car pulled up to the hotel, and a uniformed doorman stepped forward to open their door. Marcus sat frozen, Emma's words echoing in his mind. What risks was he willing to take? What price was too high for the possibility of Oliver seeing? They checked into adjoining suites, and Emma took Oliver to settle him for the night while Marcus stood at his window, looking out over the city. His phone buzzed. Victoria. Did you arrive safely? Her voice was tight, formal. Yes, we're at the hotel. Good. Marcus, I've been thinking about what you said before you left about fear. A pause, the sound of her breathing. You're right. I am afraid. But not just of false hope. I'm afraid of losing you, of losing us. This marriage has been falling apart since Oliver was born, and I don't know how to fix it. Marcus closed his eyes. Neither do I. Then maybe we need to accept that some things can't be fixed. Some losses are permanent. Her voice broke. I've hired a divorce attorney, Marcus. I'm filing papers next week. The world seemed to tilt. Victoria, please, don't make any decisions while I'm gone. Give me a chance to what? To choose me over Emma. To choose me over this impossible dream of curing our son? Victoria laughed bitterly. You've already made your choice. I'm just making mine official. What about Oliver? I'll want shared custody, of course, but Marcus, I need you to understand something. I will fight any attempt to subject our son to experimental medical treatment. If you pursue this with Dr. Chen, I will use every legal resource at my disposal to stop you. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious. Our son is not a laboratory experiment, and I won't let you and Emma turn him into one. The line went dead. Marcus stood there, phone in hand, trying to process what had just happened. His marriage was ending. Victoria was going to fight him for custody, and tomorrow he was supposed to meet with a doctor about a treatment that might save Oliver's sight or kill him. A knock at the connecting door. Marcus? Emma's voice. Is everything okay? He opened the door to find her standing there in sweatpants and a t-shirt, her hair down, looking younger and more vulnerable than he'd ever seen her. Victoria's filing for divorce. She's going to fight me if I try to pursue treatment for Oliver. Emma's expression shifted from shock to anger to something that looked like guilt. This is my fault. I shouldn't have pushed you to come here. I shouldn't have... Stop! Marcus stepped forward, and suddenly they were very close, standing in the doorway between their rooms. You gave me hope, Emma. For the first time in 8 months, you made me believe my son could have more than the limited life everyone else had condemned him to. Victoria's decision is about her, not you. But if I hadn't come into your life, then I'd still be standing in that nursery every night, staring at my son and seeing nothing but tragedy. You changed that. You changed everything. Marcus realized his hand had come up to her face, his thumb brushing away a tear on her cheek. And I can't regret that, no matter what it costs me. The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither could name. Then Oliver made a sound from the next room, breaking the spell. Emma stepped back, flustered. I should check on him, she said. Emma, wait. Marcus caught her hand. Tomorrow when we meet Dr. Chen, I need you to promise me something. Promise me you'll tell me the absolute truth about the risks. Not what you think I want to hear, but what you actually believe. Can you do that? Emma met his eyes, and he saw the war raging behind them, her desperate desire to help Oliver battling with her knowledge of what the treatment truly entailed. I promise, she whispered. The next morning they took a cab to an unremarkable office building in Cambridge, just a few blocks from MIT. Dr. Chen's office turned out to be a small research facility tucked away on the 3rd floor, with no signage and security that required 3 separate clearances. Dr. Sarah Chen herself met them in the lobby. She was in her mid-50s, with silver-streaked black hair pulled back in a neat bun, and sharp, intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. When she saw Emma, her professional demeanor cracked for just a moment. "Emma Castellano, I never thought I'd see you again." "Dr. Chen." Emma shifted Oliver to her other arm. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us." The doctor's eyes moved to Marcus, assessing. "Mr. Wellington, I've read your son's medical files. Emma sent them to me last week." She glanced at Emma with an expression that was hard to read. "Come, we have much to discuss." She led them through a series of corridors to a private conference room. Once they were seated, and Oliver was settled in a portable bassinet that Dr. Chen provided, the doctor pulled up a presentation on the large monitor at the end of the table. "Let me be absolutely clear from the start," Dr. Chen began. "What I'm about to show you is not approved by the FDA. It's not endorsed by any major medical institution. And if word got out that I was even discussing this with you, I could lose my medical license and face criminal charges." "Then why are you discussing it?" Marcus asked. Dr. Chen looked at Emma. "Because 10 years ago, I made a promise to a 6-year-old girl that if her sacrifice meant anything, it would be to help other children like her. I've spent the last decade refining the treatment that saved Emma's sight. And I believe that we've eliminated the fatal complications that killed those 3 children." She clicked to the next slide, showing complex genetic sequences. "Oliver has the same rare mutation that made Emma responsive to treatment. It's a variation in the CRIA gene that affects how proteins fold in the optic nerve. In most people, this mutation is benign, but in cases where optic nerve hyperplasia occurs, this mutation creates an opportunity." "What kind of opportunity?" Marcus leaned forward. "The mutation means Oliver's optic nerve tissue isn't dead, it's dormant. With the right combination of gene therapy and growth factors, we can potentially wake it up, convince it to complete the development that stopped in utero." Dr. Chen pulled up brain scans. "I've successfully performed this treatment on 4 patients in the last 3 years. All adults, all carefully selected candidates. 3 of them now have functional vision. 1 had no response but suffered no adverse effects." Emma's head snapped up. "You've done 4 more cases? When? Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I promised you that you would be the last child I put through that hell, Emma. These were adults who understood the risks and could consent for themselves." Dr. Chen's expression softened. "But Oliver is 8 months old. He's at the optimal age for neuroplasticity. If we attempt this treatment now, his brain is young enough to fully integrate the visual input. Wait even 6 more months, and that window starts to close." Marcus felt his heart racing. "What's the success rate?" "Define success." "If you mean complete restoration of sight, about 75% based on my limited sample size. If you mean any improvement in visual function, 100% in adult patients." Dr. Chen paused. "But I need to be honest about what the treatment involves." For the next hour, Dr. Chen walked them through every detail of the procedure. The 4 separate sessions of gene therapy administered directly into each eye, the 3-day recovery periods in complete darkness between sessions, the risk of infection, rejection, adverse neurological effects, the pain management protocols, which were better than they'd been 10 years ago, but still imperfect for an infant. "The entire process takes 6 weeks, Dr. Chen concluded. Oliver would need to stay here in our facility, under constant monitoring. And, Mr. Wellington, I need you to understand something crucial. For the first 2 weeks, Oliver's condition will appear to worsen. His eyes will be swollen, painful. He'll cry constantly. You'll watch your son suffer, and you'll question whether you made the right choice." Marcus looked at Oliver, sleeping peacefully in the bassinet. "And after 6 weeks? If it works, his optic nerves will begin to function. He'll start seeing light and shadow first, then shapes, then eventually details. Full visual acuity usually develops over the following 6 months, as his brain learns to process the input." Dr. Chen's voice was gentle but firm. "But Marcus, I need to stress this. There's still a chance of severe complications. The adult patients I treated could communicate their symptoms, Oliver can't. We'll be monitoring him constantly, but we could miss something critical. What's the worst-case scenario? Death, seizures, permanent brain damage, blindness worse than what he has now." Dr. Chen removed her glasses and rubbed her eyes. "I won't sugarcoat this, Mr. Wellington. I'm offering you a chance to give your son sight, but the price could be everything. Marcus sat back, feeling like the walls were closing in. Emma had been quiet throughout the presentation, her face pale. Now she spoke, her voice barely audible. "Show him the video, Dr. Chen." The doctor hesitated. "Emma, I don't think—" "Show him. He needs to see what I went through, what Oliver would go through." Dr. Chen sighed and pulled up a video file. "This is from Emma's first treatment session. I'm warning you, it's difficult to watch." The screen filled with a small exam room. A 6-year-old Emma strapped into a modified dentist's chair, her eyes held open with medical speculums. A team of doctors surrounded her, preparing syringes filled with a glowing blue solution, and then the needle entered her eye, and child Emma began to scream. Marcus watched in horror as the little girl thrashed against the restraints, screaming words he could barely understand through her tears. The doctors kept working, one of them stroking her hair and speaking soothingly, while another monitored displays showing her neural responses. The injection took 10 minutes. Then they did the other eye. When it was over, child Emma was sobbing, exhausted, limp in the chair. Adult Emma, sitting beside Marcus in the conference room, had tears streaming down her face. "That's what it looks like," she said. "That's the price." Marcus felt bile rise in his throat. I can't do that to him." "I know," Emma whispered. "I know." Dr. Chen stopped the video. "Mr. Wellington, I need to tell you something Emma doesn't know. The reason I agreed to meet with you wasn't just because of my promise to her. It was because I've developed a new sedation protocol in the last year, one that allows patients to sleep through most of the procedure, while still maintaining the neural responsiveness we need." Emma's head jerked up. "What? Why didn't you lead with that?" "Because I needed you both to understand the full scope of what this treatment has historically required. I needed you to see the absolute worst-case scenario before I offered you hope." Dr. Chen pulled up another file. With the new protocol, Oliver would be sedated but responsive. He wouldn't experience the same level of pain Emma did. But there's a trade-off. The sedation adds additional risks: respiratory depression, cardiac complications. We're medicating an infant in ways that have never been tested in clinical trials. Marcus stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Cambridge streets below. People going about their normal lives, unaware that in this room an impossible decision was being made. He thought about Victoria, about her threats to fight him in court. He thought about Oliver's future, the life he could have as a blind man, adapted and fulfilled in his own way, versus the gamble of sight that could end in tragedy. And he thought about Emma, about the courage it must have taken for that little girl to endure what he'd just watched, about the guilt she must carry, knowing 3 other children had died while she survived. "I need time," he said finally, turning back to face them. "I need to think about this, talk to other specialists, understand all the options." "Of course," Dr. Chen said, "but Mr. Wellington, you should know, the longer you wait, the less optimal Oliver's age becomes. Every month that passes reduces the probability of success. How long do I have to decide? If you want to maximize his chances, you have perhaps 3 months before the window starts to close significantly. 6 months at the absolute outside." Marcus nodded slowly. "Thank you, Dr. Chen, for your honesty, for everything." As they prepared to leave, Dr. Chen pulled Emma aside. Marcus, packing up Oliver's things, couldn't hear their conversation, but he saw Emma's face go pale, saw her nod once, sharply. When she returned to him, she looked shaken. "What did she say?" Marcus asked as they walked to the elevator. "She said that if you decide to do this, she wants me to be here, to help Oliver through it the way I had to go through it." Emma's voice was hollow. "She thinks having someone who understands the experience could make a difference." "And what do you think?" The elevator doors opened and they stepped inside. Emma looked down at Oliver, who had woken and was making soft cooing sounds. "I think I would relive every second of my treatment 1,000 times if it meant sparing him. But I don't get to make that choice for you. This is your decision, Marcus, yours and Victoria's." "Victoria will never agree." "I know." Emma met his eyes. "So you need to decide if you're willing to make this choice without her blessing." And if you're willing to live with the consequences if something goes wrong. The elevator descended, and with each floor, Marcus felt the weight of responsibility crushing him. By the time they reached the lobby, he'd made a preliminary decision. He just didn't know yet if it was the right one. 2 months later, Marcus stood in a Boston courtroom, facing his wife across a gulf that felt wider than any ocean. The emergency custody hearing had been fast-tracked due to Victoria's claims that Marcus was planning to subject Oliver to dangerous experimental treatment against medical advice. "Your Honor," Victoria's attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Hendricks, addressed the judge, "My client has evidence that Mr. Wellington intends to enroll his son in an illegal medical trial that has resulted in multiple deaths. We're asking for sole custody and a restraining order preventing Mr. Wellington from making any medical decisions for the child." Marcus's attorney, David Chen, no relation to Dr. Sarah Chen, stood to respond. "That's a gross mischaracterization of the situation, Your Honor. Mr. Wellington has been exploring all possible options for his son's condition, as any loving parent would. He has made no commitment to any specific treatment." The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Margaret Thornton, looked over her reading glasses at both parties. "I've reviewed the medical records and the documentation both sides have provided. This is an extraordinarily difficult situation, Mr. Wellington. Would you like to address the court directly?" Marcus stood, his hands trembling slightly. "Your Honor, when my son was born blind, I was devastated. I thought his life would be limited, constrained by a disability he had no choice in. But over the past months, I've learned something important. Oliver doesn't need to be fixed. He needs to be loved, supported, and given every opportunity to thrive in his own way." He saw Victoria's expression shift, surprise flickering across her face. "However," Marcus continued, "I've also learned that there may be a treatment that could give him functional vision. It's risky, yes, it's experimental, yes. But the doctor who pioneered it has successfully treated multiple patients with minimal complications. And the choice before me isn't between a perfect solution and a safe one. It's between giving my son a chance at sight and accepting his blindness as permanent when it might not be." "And what about the child who died during the original trials?" Patricia Hendricks interjected. 3 children, Marcus corrected quietly. 3 children died 10 years ago when the protocol was in its infancy. Those deaths led to a decade of refinement, of improved techniques, of safety measures that didn't exist before. Should we abandon all medical advancement because the first attempts had tragic results? Should we have given up on heart transplants after the first failures? Judge Thornton held up a hand. "Mr. Wellington, I appreciate your passion, but I need facts, not philosophy. Have you made a decision to proceed with this treatment?" Marcus took a deep breath. "No, Your Honor. I've decided not to pursue it." The courtroom went silent. Victoria's eyes widened. Even Emma, sitting in the gallery, looked shocked. 3 weeks ago," Marcus continued, "I spoke with 5 different pediatric neurologists, 2 bioethicists, and 4 parents of blind children. What I learned is that blindness is not the tragedy I thought it was. Children like Oliver can and do live full, extraordinary lives. They experience the world differently, not deficiently. And while the treatment Dr. Chen offers might give Oliver sight, it would also take from him the unique perspective he's developing, the heightened senses, the different way of understanding space and sound and touch." Marcus looked directly at Victoria. "I was so focused on what Oliver couldn't do that I stopped seeing what he could do, and I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry I made you feel like his blindness was something shameful, something that needed to be cured at any cost." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "But," Marcus said, turning back to the judge, "I'm not saying I'll never reconsider treatment in the future. As Oliver grows, as he becomes able to understand and express his own wishes, he should have a say in whether he wants to pursue sight. That decision should ultimately be his when he's old enough to make it. For now, my focus is on giving him the best childhood possible, blind or sighted." Judge Thornton studied him for a long moment. "Mrs. Wellington, do you have anything to add?" Victoria stood slowly, wiping her eyes. "Your Honor, I wasn't expecting this. Marcus, are you serious? You're really not going to pursue the treatment?" "Not now. Not while he's an infant who can't consent." Not while there are still significant risks. Marcus's voice was firm. But Victoria, I need you to understand, I haven't given up on the possibility. If the treatment becomes safer, if Oliver expresses a desire for it when he's older, I want to keep that door open. Victoria looked at her attorney, then back at Marcus. Patricia, can we have a recess? I need to speak with my husband privately. The judge granted a 30-minute recess, and Marcus and Victoria were ushered into a small conference room. For a moment, they just stared at each other across the table. You really mean it? Victoria asked finally. This isn't some strategy to win the custody case. It's not strategy, it's the truth. Marcus sat down heavily. Victoria, I've been so caught up in trying to fix Oliver that I forgot to just be his father. Emma helped me see that, ironically. She went through that treatment, she got her sight back, and she still carries the scars, physical and emotional, from the experience. She told me last week that if she could go back, if she could choose, she's not sure she would do it again. She said that? Marcus nodded. The treatment gave her vision, but it also took her childhood. It gave her trauma that she'll carry forever. And when I think about putting Oliver through that, even a modified, safer version, I can't justify it. Not when he could have a happy, healthy childhood without it. Victoria's hands were shaking. I came here today prepared to fight you. Prepared to take Oliver and never let you see him again if that's what it took to keep him safe. But Marcus, what you just said in there, that's the man I married. The man who thinks before he acts, who considers all angles. I lost that man for a while. I'm sorry. So did I. Victoria reached across the table and took his hand. We've both been drowning, Marcus. Drowning in grief and fear and anger. And instead of helping each other, we've been pulling each other under. Can we stop drowning? Marcus asked quietly. Can we try to save this marriage, save this family? Victoria was quiet for a long time. I don't know if I can trust you again. I don't know if I can trust myself, but I think we owe it to Oliver to try. He deserves parents who are a team, not enemies. What about the divorce papers? I'll withdraw them on one condition. Victoria's grip on his hand tightened. Emma has to go. I know she helped you. I know she means well, but Marcus, I can't share my son's life with the woman who's been coming between us. It's not fair, but it's how I feel. Marcus felt his heart sink. Victoria, I know she's been good for Oliver. I know she understands his condition in ways we don't, but we can find other specialists, other therapists. We just can't have her. Victoria's voice broke. Please, Marcus, if you want this marriage to work, if you want us to co-parent successfully, you have to choose. Her or me. Marcus pulled his hand away and stood, walking to the small window that looked out on a courtyard. He thought about Emma, her dedication to Oliver, her courage in sharing her painful past, the way she'd transformed how he saw his son. But he also thought about his marriage, about the family he'd built with Victoria, about the vows they'd made. All right, he said finally, I'll let her go, but I want to be the one to tell her, and I want us to give her an exceptional severance package and references. She deserves that much. Victoria nodded, relief flooding her face. Thank you. Thank you, Marcus. They returned to the courtroom and informed the judge that they'd reached an agreement. The custody case was dismissed, the divorce papers withdrawn. As they left the courthouse together, Marcus saw Emma waiting by the car. Her face told him she already knew what had happened. I heard some of it, she said quietly. The courtroom doors aren't as soundproof as they should be. Emma, I'm so sorry. If there was any other way, there isn't, and it's okay. Emma looked past him to where Victoria was talking to her attorney. You made the right choice, Marcus. About the treatment, about your marriage, all of it. Oliver needs his parents together. He needs stability. You've been so important to his development, to both of us. Emma smiled sadly. I was a bridge, Marcus. I helped you get from despair to hope, from fear to acceptance. But you don't need me anymore. You and Victoria can take it from here. Will you be all right? I always am. Emma handed him an envelope. This is the name of a specialist in New York, Dr. Amanda Foster. She works with blind children using techniques similar to mine, but she's fully credentialed and has no complicated history. She can help you continue Oliver's sensory development. Marcus took the envelope, his throat tight. "Thank you for everything." Emma reached up and touched his face, a gesture so brief and gentle it might have been imagined. "Take care of him. And Marcus, don't close the door completely on the treatment. Just because you're not doing it now doesn't mean it won't be right someday. Keep the information Dr. Chen gave you. When Oliver is older, let him know it exists." "Let him choose." "I will." Emma walked away then, getting into a waiting taxi without looking back. Marcus stood watching until the car disappeared into Boston traffic, feeling like something precious had just slipped through his fingers. Victoria came up beside him. "Was that hard?" "Yes. I'm sorry it had to be this way." "So am I." Marcus turned to his wife. "But you're right. We need to focus on our family now, just the three of us." They drove back to the hotel in silence, collected Oliver from the hotel's childcare service, and prepared to fly home. On the plane, with Oliver sleeping between them and Victoria's hand in his, Marcus tried to convince himself he'd made the right choice. But he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just walked away from something, someone, who had fundamentally changed him. And he wondered if Victoria felt it too, the ghost of Emma's presence lingering in the space between them. What Marcus didn't know was that Emma had left one final gift. In the envelope with Dr. Foster's information was a second document, a sealed letter to Oliver to be opened on his 18th birthday. A letter explaining the treatment, the choice Marcus had made, and the option that would still exist if Oliver wanted to pursue it as an adult. Emma had kept her promise to be honest. She'd told Marcus the truth about the risks, but she'd also ensured that Oliver would someday know the truth about the opportunity his father had chosen to postpone. Because some choices, Emma believed, were too important to make for someone else, even if that someone was your own child. 9 years later, Marcus sat in his home office, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across his desk. The Wellington estate had changed significantly in the past decade. The nursery had been converted into a bedroom befitting a 9-year-old boy. The sensory garden Emma had started had been expanded into an entire wing dedicated to Oliver's education and development. And the relationship between Marcus and Victoria, while never quite returning to what it had been, had evolved into something new, a partnership built on mutual respect and shared purpose. Oliver burst through the office door, his guide dog, a golden retriever named Compass, at his side. Dad, you have to hear this." Marcus smiled at his son's enthusiasm. Oliver had grown into a remarkable child, confident, curious, with a sharp mind and an infectious laugh. His blindness, rather than limiting him, seemed to have enhanced his ability to connect with people, to understand emotions through tone and touch in ways that constantly amazed Marcus. "What is it, buddy?" "Mrs. Foster said I'm ready to start learning echolocation, like advanced echolocation, where I can navigate entire buildings and identify objects just by sound." Oliver's face glowed with excitement. "She said I have a natural gift for it, that my spatial awareness is already college level." Marcus felt a surge of pride. Dr. Amanda Foster, the specialist Emma had recommended 9 years ago, had become an integral part of their lives. Under her guidance, Oliver had developed abilities that seemed almost superhuman. He could identify people by their footsteps, navigate complex environments using sound and spatial memory, even see the general shape and size of objects through acoustic analysis. "That's incredible, Ollie. I'm so proud of you. Can I show you, please?" "There's this technique where, later, I promise. Right now I need you to sit down for a minute. There's something I want to talk to you about." Oliver's expression became serious. Even at 9, he could read his father's moods with uncanny accuracy. "Is something wrong?" "No, nothing's wrong, but nothing's." Marcus pulled out a folder he'd kept locked in his desk drawer for 9 years. "Oliver, when you were a baby, there was a woman who worked for us. Her name was Emma Carter, though that wasn't her real name. She was your nanny for a few months." "I don't remember her." "You wouldn't. You were only 8 months old when she left. But, Oliver, she was important. She helped me understand that your blindness wasn't something to fix or cure. She helped me see you as a person, not a problem." Oliver sat down in the chair across from Marcus, Compass settling at his feet. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because Emma left something for you. A letter that she asked me to give you when you turned 9. Marcus slid the envelope across the desk, and because that letter contains information about a treatment that might give you functional vision. Oliver's hands found the envelope, his sensitive fingers tracing its edges. A treatment like surgery. More complicated than that. Gene therapy, stem cell transplantation. It's experimental, risky, but potentially effective. Marcus leaned forward. Oliver, I need you to understand. When you were a baby, I considered this treatment. I came very close to putting you through it. But I decided against it because I realized you didn't need to be fixed. You were perfect as you were. Am I still perfect? Oliver asked quietly. Absolutely. But you're also old enough now to start thinking about your own future, your own choices. This letter explains the treatment, how it works, what it would involve. And Emma wanted you to know that if you ever wanted to pursue it, the option exists. Oliver was quiet for a long moment, turning the envelope over in his hands. Can you read it to me? Marcus opened the letter and began to read Emma's words. She'd written about her own experience, about the pain and the fear and the miracle of seeing for the first time. But she'd also written about the cost, the nightmares, the guilt, the feeling of having lost something precious even as she gained sight. The choice to see, Emma had written, is not the simple gift people imagine it to be. Vision is wonderful, but it's not better than touch or sound or smell, it's just different. And, Oliver, you have developed a way of experiencing the world that is uniquely yours, uniquely beautiful. If you choose to pursue this treatment someday, you won't be gaining sight. You'll be trading one type of perception for another. Both are valid, both are valuable. Choose based on what you want, not what others think you should want. When Marcus finished reading, Oliver sat in thoughtful silence. Finally, he spoke. Dad, can I ask you something? Anything. Do you wish I could see? Marcus felt his throat tighten. I wish you could have whatever makes you happiest, Ollie. If that's sight, then yes. If it's the life you have now, then that's what I wish for. There's no right answer. Oliver nodded slowly. I think I want to wait. Maybe when I'm older, like 18 or something, I can decide if I want to try the treatment. But right now, I like my life. I like who I am. And I don't want to change that, just because other people think being blind is sad. Pride and relief flooded through Marcus. That's very wise, son. But can I keep the letter in case I change my mind? Of course, it's yours. Oliver stood, carefully folding the letter and tucking it into his pocket. Dad, can I ask one more thing? Sure. Do you think Emma would want to meet me? Like, now that I'm older? I'd like to thank her for helping you see me the right way. Marcus was startled by the question. He hadn't spoken to Emma in 9 years, though he'd followed her career from a distance. She'd gone on to get her doctorate in developmental psychology, published groundbreaking research on sensory integration in blind children, and was now a professor at UCLA. I don't know if she'd want to revisit the past, Ollie. It was a difficult time for her. But you could ask, right? Send her an email or something. Oliver's face was hopeful. I think she should know that her choice to help you helped me. Even if we never met, she changed my life. That evening, after Oliver had gone to bed, Marcus found himself composing an email he never thought he'd write. Dear Emma, he began, it's been 9 years since we last spoke. I hope this message finds you well, and that you don't mind me reaching out after all this time. Today I gave Oliver your letter. He's 9 now, remarkable and brilliant and happy. He read your words about choice and identity, and he asked if he could meet you. He wants to thank you for helping his father see him clearly. I don't know if that's something you'd be open to, and I understand if the answer is no. But I wanted you to know that what you did for us, for me, continues to resonate. You saved our family in ways I'm still discovering. With gratitude and respect, Marcus. He sent the email before he could second-guess himself, then closed his laptop and went to check on Oliver. His son was asleep, Compass curled up on the bed beside him, one of Oliver's hands resting on the dog's head. Marcus stood in the doorway, watching his child breathe, and felt a peace he hadn't known in years. The next morning there was a response from Emma. Dear Marcus, she'd written, your email brought tears to my eyes. I would be honored to meet Oliver, if he truly wants to meet me. I'm coming to Boston in 2 weeks for a conference. Perhaps we could arrange something then? I've thought about you and Oliver often over the years, wondered if I made the right choice in leaving, in staying silent. Hearing that he's happy and thriving is the greatest gift you could have given me. I look forward to seeing you both. Warmly, Emma. 2 weeks later, Marcus and Oliver sat in a quiet cafe in Cambridge, not far from where Marcus had first met Dr. Chen 9 years ago. Victoria had chosen not to come, but she'd given her blessing, recognizing that Emma's role in their family's story deserved acknowledgement. When Emma walked through the door, Marcus felt his breath catch. She looked different, more professional, more confident, her hair shorter and her manner more self-assured. But her eyes were the same, carrying that deep understanding of pain and perseverance. "Marcus," she said, approaching their table. "Emma." He stood, and they embraced briefly, awkwardly, aware of Oliver watching from his seat. "This is Oliver." Emma turned to the boy, and her expression transformed. "Hello, Oliver. It's wonderful to finally meet you." Oliver stood and extended his hand, finding hers with the precision of long practice. "Hi, Emma. My dad read me your letter. It was really cool." They sat, and for a while they talked about small things: Oliver's school, his interests, his mastery of echolocation. Emma asked questions with genuine curiosity, and Oliver responded with the openness of a child who knew he was valued for who he was. Finally, Oliver said, "Emma, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you ever regret getting the treatment? Like, now that you can see, do you ever wish you'd stayed blind?" Emma was quiet for a moment, considering her answer carefully. "That's a complicated question, Oliver. The treatment gave me opportunities I wouldn't have had otherwise. I can see my students' faces, watch sunsets, read books without assistive technology. But it also took something from me, the heightened senses I'd developed, the different way of understanding the world. I used to be able to hear things, feel things, that I can't anymore because my brain prioritizes visual input now. So it's a trade-off?" "Exactly. Not better or worse, just different." Emma reached across the table and found Oliver's hand. "And Oliver, I want you to know something. The person you are right now, the abilities you've developed, the perspective you have, that's precious. Don't let anyone, including me, convince you that sight would make you more complete. You're already complete." Oliver smiled, a genuine, radiant smile. "That's what my dad says too." "Your dad is a wise man." Marcus felt emotion well up in his chest. "I learned it from you, Emma." They talked for another hour, Emma sharing stories about her research, Oliver telling her about his plans to study music and spatial acoustics. When it was time to leave, Oliver hugged Emma with the unself-conscious affection of a child who had been raised to see the good in people. "Thank you for writing me that letter," he said, "and thank you for helping my dad when I was a baby." "Thank you for being exactly who you are," Emma replied, her voice thick with emotion. As they parted ways outside the cafe, Emma pulled Marcus aside. "He's extraordinary. You and Victoria have done an amazing job raising him. We had a good start, thanks to you." Marcus paused. "Emma, I need to tell you something. Victoria and we're in a good place now, better than we've been in years. And a lot of that is because of the foundation you helped us build. The choice I made 9 years ago to prioritize Oliver's happiness over a potential cure, that choice saved our family. I'm so glad, Marcus. That's all I ever wanted. But I also need to apologize for making you leave, for choosing my marriage over your continued presence in Oliver's life. I sometimes wonder what might have been different if you'd stayed." Emma shook her head. "Don't wonder about that. You made the right choice for your family. And honestly, leaving was what I needed too. It pushed me to finish my education, to transform my experience into something that could help other families. If I'd stayed, I would have been just Oliver's nanny. Instead, I became someone who could change the field. Do you think," Marcus hesitated, "do you think we could stay in touch? I'd like Oliver to have you in his life, even if just peripherally. You understand him in ways that even Victoria and I can't. I'd like that very much." They exchanged a final hug, and Marcus watched Emma walk away down the Cambridge street, feeling like a circle had finally been completed. Not closed, but completed, acknowledging the past while embracing the future. That night Marcus sat with Oliver in his bedroom, Compass snoring softly at the foot of the bed. "Dad?" Oliver said sleepily. "I've been thinking about the treatment." Marcus's heart skipped. "Oh, not about doing it now. Not about... But about what Emma said, about how getting sight meant losing other senses. It made me realize something." Oliver turned his head toward his father's voice. "I don't think I want the treatment at all. Not now, not when I'm 18, not ever." "Ollie, you don't have to decide that now. You're only 9. "I know. But I've been thinking about it since I read Emma's letter, and I realized that I like being blind. It's part of who I am. It's not something wrong with me that needs fixing." Oliver's voice was confident, certain. "Maybe someday I'll change my mind. But right now I don't want to see the world the way you and Mom do. I want to keep experiencing it my way." Marcus felt tears stream down his face. "Then that's exactly what you'll do. And Oliver, I'm proud of you, not despite your blindness, but because of everything you are, including your blindness. Thanks, Dad. I love you. I love you too, buddy. So much." As Oliver drifted off to sleep, Marcus thought about the journey that had brought them here. The despair of that initial diagnosis, the false hope and crushing disappointment, Emma's transformative presence, the choice to prioritize Oliver's well-being over his own desires, and finally, Oliver's own agency in determining his future. The treatment still existed, still waited in the wings if Oliver ever changed his mind. Dr. Chen had continued her research, continued to refine the protocol. The success rate was now approaching 90%, with minimal complications. If Oliver wanted sight someday, it would be there. But Marcus realized he no longer cared whether his son could see. He cared only that Oliver was happy, fulfilled, living a life of his own choosing. And looking at his sleeping son, brilliant, confident, extraordinary, Marcus knew that Oliver's life would be remarkable, regardless of whether he ever saw a sunset. The real miracle, Marcus understood now, hadn't been the possibility of restoring Oliver's sight. The real miracle had been learning to see his son clearly, to recognize that different didn't mean deficient, that blindness was just one aspect of a complete, whole person. Emma had given them that gift. Not the treatment, not the hope of a cure, but the perspective to see what was already there. A perfect child who didn't need fixing, just love, support, and the freedom to become whoever he was meant to be. And in the end, that was the only miracle they'd ever needed.